Hello. So this is the Social Impact Roundtable panel. We will be discussing how blockchain technology can help the world. There's a lot to get into. I'm going to have the panelists introduce themselves first. We can start with Michael.
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm founder of Shrub. We're building a protocol for weather-based derivatives for things like earthquakes and hurricanes. And we're trying to build market-priced parametric insurance assets so that people who are at risk for these things can protect themselves using these tokenized weather derivatives and buy it at fair market prices.
Dave, do you want to go next?
Sure. Dave Hale, I'm with technosurf. Technosurf is a global nonprofit. We have about 1,500 people in 30 countries and provide solutions that offer business solutions to poverty, mainly for smallholder farmers and entrepreneurs in the countries that we operate in South America, Africa, and India. And we're using a lot of basic technologies and are starting to think about blockchain and Chainlink solutions for micronutrient food fortification, supply chain traceability, and other applications related to validation of satellite data for insurance and other purposes.
Manis?
Hi, so yeah, my name is Manolis or Manos. I have a company that is doing environmental IoT and weather analytics for large enterprises for a few years now, but recently we started focusing on the agriculture space, and we're trying to solve the problem of weather data scarcity. So we realized that there's not enough weather data out there, and this is blocking a number of services specifically to smallholder farmers. For example, parametric weather insurance, or a better forecast, or precision agriculture. So we have been working on a mechanism that will enable farmers to deploy weather stations and produce weather data and utilize this weather data to provide additional services, either back to them again or to third-party companies. So we are somewhere between a weather oracle and a hardware manufacturer that has created the world's first blockchain-compatible weather station.
Great, and Tamar, last but not least.
Hi, I'm Tomer from Good Dollar. Good Dollar is a universal basic income token. Our vision is to create a new economy, a new world economy, where the distribution mechanism of that economy is based on a universal basic income. We launched last September, about a year ago. We reached so far about 225,000 people, very active in Vietnam, Nigeria, Indonesia, South Africa, Venezuela, and Colombia and Argentina.
Great. So let's get started. We are obviously in a very tumultuous regulatory environment around blockchain and crypto right now. There seems to be a lot of skepticism about what the industry can do for the world. So I would like to hear from all of you, just as a starting point, how can blockchain technology help people and help solve some problems? And whoever wants to get started, please take it away.
I don't mind jumping in. So I think it's important when we think about what can blockchain do, especially for social good. We have to think about what are the benefits of blockchain. And one benefit I think is very important, and to borrow from Chris Dixon, who's a partner at A16Z, is that blockchain allows you to write code that makes strong commitments about what it will do in the future. For example, Bitcoin will only ever have 21 million Bitcoins, and that is guaranteed by the actual protocol, not by some other entity. And so that wasn't really a thing before crypto. And so before crypto, you can see how this is manifested is that individuals, when they want to buy insurance or deposit their money in a bank or invest in something, they have to put their trust in another entity. In the US, that's kind of led to these big institutionalized trusted, users. And we put our money in with Bank of America because we trust them, because they're insured by the government. It's also led to regulation. Like, you have to be an accredited investor in order to invest in startups and have a net worth over $1 million. The reason for this is because if you can't trust a person, or if they try and scam you, there aren't really protections against that for individuals. But now with crypto, because you're kind of taking that need for trust and need for this like future commitment away, some of these things become unnecessary or get better. So in the case of banks or insurance companies, these big trusted banks have the ability to extract fees and extract things that a lot of consumers disagree with. But they have to trust them because they're the biggest things. In cases where this financial trusted infrastructure isn't in place, like I know Dave has worked with some of these farmers in more rural areas, they just don't have an option, right? So things like insurance, things like banking aren't even available to them. So I think one aspect of what crypto can do, and blockchain in general, is actually make, like, this trustless thing is actually very important, and it will make things better for people in the West who have this infrastructure already, and it will actually allow access to this infrastructure to people in other places that might not have access to it right now.
Maybe I'll build on that. Many of the clients that we work with lack pretty basic technologies, and by basic technology I mean oftentimes they may not have a radio or a text phone. And so the key thing that we always start with is we have to kind of start with the business problem and ask ourselves, what is the fundamental business problem that we're trying to solve? And then in some cases, blockchain may be appropriate. But typically it is several steps removed from the users that we're actually working with. And so one of the key things that we try to figure out is, how do we, if blockchain is an appropriate technology as a, secure, distributed, immutable, trusted ledger, then kind of how do I connect my end user, which is a farmer that may or may not have a text phone, to the technology that's going to create that solution that's the secure, immutable, trusted solution that's going to create a contractual obligation in the future for weather or whatever it may be.
So we look at that from a bit of a different direction. Like, we are the type of crypto first kind of people. We believe, Good Dollar, that living in a mono currency system is doomed to failure in one step or another. Like, we can look at it as the same as looking at a crop of wheat. That if there will be a disease in it, the whole field will die. Unlike a jungle, where if there will be a disease for one species, it could still be sustainable and can still be alive. Blockchain and cryptocurrencies in general allow us to create a world where people can participate in several economies. So in case one of the economies they participate in, and if we look at 50% of the world, they are living in collapsing economies, other economies can still thrive unrelated to the national economy in which they live in. So that's like the point of view where we look at that.
I think I can relate to what Dave was saying because I prefer to see blockchain technology as something, not as an alternative mechanism for currency, but a technology that can be applied into many other things. And that's the interesting part about Chainlink oracles, is that the fact that they allow you to connect with the physical world and to implement other use cases other than circulating money around, basically. So yeah. So to me, this new Web3 world that we are building, I see a lot of applications solving problems that we have created ourselves in the first place because of massive centralization, because of massive overheads building on top of each other, like Michael described at the beginning very nicely. All these institutions and all these organizations to operate properly. I see blockchain as a means to skim some of that fat and give it back to the people, and basically reduce the overheads and the costs in backbone operations of society and of economy in general. And like Dave said, probably end users are not going to realize what's happening underneath the hood, and they're not going to be, in some cases at least, they don't have to have a wallet. But sure, if they can end up with a wallet in their hand, a crypto wallet, and that's even better. That means things are moving faster than expected.
Yeah, I didn't say it's instead of. Like, I do agree with like everything that was said before me. Just it wouldn't sound like.
I think that Manos summed it up pretty well. And I think Tomer's application with Good Dollar is actually like one of those applications where it wouldn't work if crypto wasn't available as a tool. Because if you give money to the people at the head of government, tell them to distribute it equally, and it's coming from a third party, there's no visibility into how that actually happens. And I also want to add that it's hard to predict exactly how people will use these new benefits of like blockchain technology. And it's hard to see what will be created, because we're basically 2 years in since most of the big projects today were built in 2017. So 4 years, I guess. And so this is a very short period of time. And these projects can serve as building blocks for more projects. And so I think it's really hard to imagine what will be like the killer use cases, the killer things that help people on a specific level, beyond knowing that, okay, you might not need to trust a big institution. You might be able to have ownership in whatever protocol you're participating in, etc. I think one example is DAOs. So we have like a republic system in the United States where we trust our representatives, and because it's infeasible to have everyone vote on every single issue. But with DAOs, there are these organizations where people might be able to vote on every single issue, or at least have the ability to choose their own representatives on a kind of micro level. And so it's an interesting area that could have big implications for just governance of companies or countries even in the future.
Definitely. And going off that note, Dave, you brought up an interesting point about blockchains. I think you called it the shiny new tech problem, and this issue of tech first versus problem first. And I was wondering if you could dive into that a little bit.
Sure. I mean, it's what in Silicon Valley we tend to call product out thinking, is that, I've got my cool mobile phone and it's got, 8 gigabytes of RAM and it's got 5G and it's all this. And, but at the end of the day, you don't really care. What you care is that you can download your movie really fast and you can watch it offline, right? And blockchain is a little bit the same. And I think all technologies are sort of the same. At the beginning, as we talk a lot about the technology, and then we sort of forget about the use case and the user. And that is a quick way to die. And actually, especially when technology is applied to the developing world, is if you are product out technology first, it's a good recipe for failure. So the way I think, and I see Tomer nodding here, is that you need to immerse yourself in the life of the user and into the user problem, which is, you might call user-centered design or human-centered design, and then iterate rapidly by pushing solutions out. So, Mono says prototypes out in the field in Greece, great. That's the best way to get user feedback. And I think also just in blockchain, if we have a solution, that's great. So we've tried some things in India, we've tried some things in Uganda. You get great feedback and you figure out pretty quickly what works and what doesn't.
Actually, when we started working on on the agriculture space, we thought that what the farmers wanted was a better forecast, basically, because I'm an engineer, so I fall into this trap most of the time. I have a solution and I'm looking for a problem. So we found a way to produce a better forecast. We were monetizing on this ability for enterprise customers, specifically in the energy space, and we thought, great. Farmers are going to need this. So surely they'll be happy. And when we started speaking with farmers, they were like, yeah, surely it's a nice to have feature, but their problems were completely different specifically when it comes to weather. So we realized that most farmers had lost their crop at least once in the last couple of years because of extreme weather events. And that's where the insurance comes in. And depending on the country, the concept of the insurance is completely different. So yeah, I mean, I don't want to analyze it too much, but when you speak with the people who are the real stakeholders of the problem, then you realize that there's so many aspects on top of technology that you need to take into consideration.
I kind of want to add on and maybe take a slightly different perspective. Although I do 100% agree with what both of you are saying, where the product is the key. So leading with the product and leading with like what the actual users need is important. But for the builders out there who are debating whether or not they should build their application, my advice to them would be just go ahead and build it and try and build it fast and get it in front of people. Because it is hard to predict where this industry is actually going. And so if you let the idea of that blockchain may or may not be the right technology stop you from building your thing, then it might be too late once you figure that out. So I would say test as you're building and don't be afraid to just build fast and put something out there and see what happens.
And Michael, I agree. I mean, one of our core principles is try stuff, with which people think is kind of goofy, but the only good feedback is customer feedback. So you learn by putting it out there, right?
I have to say, like, from our point of view, there's a bit of a different problem. Like, our problem is the fact that people are living in collapsing economies. Something that, people look at the economy like fish is looking at the water. Fish doesn't know that he's feeling bad because the water is polluted. And when facing this kind of problem, I can ask the users about what they like and don't like about my product. And that's how we got to 250,000 of users, 80,000 of them coming daily and using our currency. But when it came to the core issue, we had an actual problem talking to our end users, because our users are not crypto users. Our users are people in the villages in Vietnam and in Nigeria. And I go talk to them. I did, to tell you that they are aware of the inflation happening in their country, and that's why they should be looking. It just didn't happen. Like that was the problem we faced when we were like, okay, let's go there and ask them about their economy. Like, no, like that's a wall we crashed into.
No, but Tomer, you got feedback because people either used your application or they didn't.
Exactly, that's also feedback, and maybe you're missing some layers. Maybe there's a gap between what you had in mind, and it doesn't mean that your idea is wrong. It's just maybe you need to add a few layers to connect to your end users.
The layer that we didn't think about, like everybody asked how will they use it, and we're like, okay, we're doing a proof of concept. Like we delivered in a year only $17,000 to 225,000 people, so it's peanuts what we gave everybody. So people are like, how will they use it? Like, how do you expect them to use it? And what we didn't see coming was what we call cheap Fiverr. People are using it today to buy digital services from another, but those are digital services that don't find a place in Fiverr. They're like even cheaper than that. But it still creates an ecosystem of thousands of transactions a day. So That's a layer that we didn't see coming, just as fun anecdote.
That could be your Stuart Butterfield pivot there. I see it.
I wanted to shift gears a little bit here and talk about crypto and blockchain's inherent transparency and how that's beneficial and why that's a pro. I think, Michael, you brought this up if you want to start.
Sure. I think one really positive thing about crypto is that at least in most chains, like you can see what's happening. You can see how other people are interacting with a contract, and you can see where money is moving. So in Ethereum and lots of chains, you have this thing called MEV, minor extractable value, which is actually a problem that the industry is facing. And it's basically, there are like ways where miners might be able to front run if someone puts in an order for a big piece of a certain coin or something, and they completely misjudge the price or they order too much for the liquidity at that time, then a miner can front run them and basically extract value from them. The thing is, the beautiful thing about crypto is that we can actually see this is happening. There are websites dedicated to tracking this, and it's a known problem with mitigation efforts underway. In the traditional financial system, this is happening as well, but like you can't actually see it happening. So Michael Lewis had a great book, Flash Boys, about how high frequency traders are front running big trades, big institutional trades and big consumer trades. You could see in Robinhood. Robinhood is a free app, right? It's free to trade stocks. And so it's not very tangible to a lot of users that the way that Robinhood is making their money is the payment for order flow, which could lead to things like this. And so it's kind of, even though in its current state, we have some of the same problems as the traditional financial industry, all these problems are exposed, and there are lots of really smart people working on trying to solve them. And I think going forward with other things like voting, other types of protocols, you'd be able to see exactly what's happening under the hood, which is completely different than what happens, like we talked about regulation before, this 11th hour amendment to like the infrastructure bill, which could have huge implications for crypto, that's just kind of shoved in like literally like in the last minute, that really could be devastating to the industry. So it's all of these things become public, and so it becomes something that we can actually talk about and do something about.
I like the transparency aspects of it, and I'll give you an example of where it's useful in our work. Is that in some cases there are very large government or say World Bank programs to distribute monies to farmers that make just a few dollars a day based on implementation of many good agricultural practices. So you want them to replant their trees, at a country level, or you want them to prune in a certain way at a country level. You can validate those via satellite, and then you could kind of control distribution, say via mobile money network to farmers, and record all of that in blockchain. That would be a great example where you want something that's secure, audible, immutable. It's not controllable by a single, say, government or nonprofit entity. It's kind of a cool system. But there are other cases where you may want part of the transaction to be obfuscated. So an example is in a supply chain. If I'm Olam, which is a major buyer of nuts and fruits and other commodities, or I'm Walmart, I don't necessarily want my competitors to see how much I'm paying or who I'm buying from, because that's my secret sauce. My supply chain and my prices are my secret sauce. So this was a while ago, it was last year, but I was talking to a team at Visa that was working on a protocol for obfuscating certain parts of an Ethereum transaction, right? And there may be cases where, I'm okay if you see that the transaction occurred, you can see it's me, but there are certain fields in that transaction I absolutely do not want public. It's not going to be like a Bitcoin purchase, right? So I think there's going to need to be some balance if you have full adoption of some of these protocols. in large global corporate supply chains.
In our case, I mean, an interesting use case, maybe similar to what Dave is saying, that we have observed with weather data is that basically what we do, we aggregate third-party weather data and analyze them as a means to produce a better forecast. And what we have observed, and for us, it's really important to know the ground truth, to know what really happened. That's why we're into the whole weather station business. And when we are aggregating data from third-party weather stations, we have observed sometimes that they change. The data could change back in time. So it's usually meteorological companies, governmental meteorological companies like NOAA or the local ones here in Greece, that they might go back in time something. Obviously, they don't do it. They're trying to correct their errors. They're not doing it to steal something from someone. But in the scenario that we're talking about of a parametric weather crop insurance, that would have been fatal, or it would have been a major problem. And in the traditional world, the crop insurance, well, at least that I'm familiar with, would require the insurance company to request paper over fax or something from a meteorological company, a governmental meteorological company. So a lot of people would have a chance to decide what was the outcome of weather conditions in a specific time in the past. But if you automate this, then there was an error in the sensors of the weather station. This error will propagate to the entire chain. But the good thing with currency is that, and therefore it's the first step to change some other aspects of the system that is obviously required to, things are required to be handled in a different way. So I think transparency might create some problems in some cases, but those problems, maybe they shouldn't be there in the first place. So, a different approach might be required that will make everything work better.
Jumping on just because I have to comment on I think it's true that could be a huge problem for a smart contract-based parametric insurance platform. But I think some of the things that Chainlink has done with price feeds, for example, where it's a consensus-based thing for multiple data sources with validation and verification. I think something like that for weather could be a potential thing where maybe we're pulling from a mixture of satellite data, local weather stations from maybe different competitors even, and then combining those into a source of truth rather than just relying on a single source of data.
I'm sorry to jump in here. I want to get one more question in. Can you all talk about how Chainlink plays a role into your work and how important it is to your underlying architecture for your smart contracts and protocols?
Yeah, I'll start. For one particular problem I mentioned, which is food fortification, the problem is not actually having an immutable database of micronutrient fortification data. The problem is actually agreeing on the measurements. And so the important thing is actually getting a consensus between government agencies, industries, IQA data, incoming quality assurance data on micronutrient fortification of flowers, edible oils, and so on. And then you stick that in a database someplace. So actually the consensus setting of the Chainlink protocol is the important bit, not so much where you store that, whether it's on blockchain or off-chain.
For us, actually, the use case is a bit different. We help other projects using Chainlink to their baseline architecture. So because we need a real identity and we use a centralized system for identity, we use FaceTech for that. what we do, take Chainlink to rewrite everything we do on a layer 2 of what are verified unique people, and they rewrite it into Ethereum on the layer 1 in order to make sure other projects can use our identity solution. So if, for example, anyone from the insurance systems here would like to use real identities, we already wrote everything into Ethereum and everybody are welcome to use it. So that's kind of like the way we help support the industry, and Chainlink, only thanks to Chainlink. So that's cool.
So yeah, I think we are in a similar space. We want to reduce friction when it comes to either it's a very mature ecosystem of tools and integrations and APIs and nodes and Oracle networks. So it seems like, you know, the best way to approach this problem of connecting smart contracts to sensor data, to the physical world, basically.
I'll wrap up and say for Shrub, we are basically kind of the definition or building the definition of what Chainlink is trying to accomplish with hybrid smart contracts, pulling real world data and having it be used directly to form a product that's better than the existing products out there. So an Oracle solution like Chainlink we wouldn't even be able to build what we're building without that. And as far as Chainlink specifically, everything from their like developer tools, their hackathon, their support, just being available to answer questions and meet about things has been great. And so they've really been a great partner in helping us build this. And yeah, without them, we wouldn't be able to build it. So thank you, Chainlink. And thanks for having all of us here, I'm sure. I second everyone else's sentiments.
Thank you all.
And thank you so much to Casey and our panelists. I love seeing discussions like this where people are sharing ideas of how blockchain can help build a better world for tomorrow.